Let me tell you a little story. There's this guy, Abe. You probably know someone like him. A real loser sort, but he tries, yeah? I know you know the type. Did mediocre in school. Probably spent one too many nights partying. Not enough studying, but got through it even if only barely. He's the unremarkable sort of person. Abe goes and gets himself married. Probably a bit too young, but you know. He's at least able to soldier on, and hey, if it makes him happy, yeah? Before long, it's a struggle. Bills pile up, work gets scarce, and the arguments start. You can't really blame Abe. He's trying, but the work just doesn't exist. Robots have taken the assembly line, the entry-level jobs, and hell, AI mostly snatched even the creative ones up. Abe's not a bad guy. He tries to be honest. He wants to make things work, to be a provider. But no one wants to give him a chance, and the bills just keep coming, and he's barely keeping his head above water. Finally, Abe's sitting around in the house, one he was fortunate enough to inherit from his grandparents, and flicking through online videos when an advertisement catches his attention. Join the military. Well, that sounds like a fine idea to old Abe. Sure, he has exercised a little, but that's what basic is for, isn't it? So Abe signs up. He doesn't bother telling the wife until it's time for him to ship out, just so she can't talk him out of it. He'll be able to give her whatever money he makes because they'll provide for him, right? It isn't long before Abe is learning the left face, right face tango, half a country away from his wife, and the problems of home. It's easier here. He doesn't have to worry about things, just do as he's told. There's a comfort in that. During training, Abe shows pretty profound effectiveness with weapons, and that proficiency continues through his advanced training courses. Before too long, there's this colonel knocking on his bunk door, offering him an opportunity, a chance to do something special and unique. He gives Abe the do it for your country speech, tells him how he will be an asset to the nation, and how many job opportunities will come his way when his term is up, should he want to go that route. It's the usual song and dance, but it works because Abe is just smart enough to see the chance, but not smart enough to recognize the pitfall. Some more training follows, and Abe does his best. He's middle of the pack in most aspects, but he can still shoot with the best of them. So they let him slide on the harder things. They don't want him for his brain, after all. That's when it happens. Deployment. Time to take those oh-so-valuable skills and go out into the world to kill. He and his unit are dropped into the heart of Ohio. If Abe had been a little smarter, he'd understand why. The nation is in turmoil. People like him are jobless, hungry, watching their families starve. And so those people are turning into angry mobs all over the nation. The results are what you should expect when an unruly mob runs into armed and trained professionals. Abe didn't feel much of it himself. They were just targets, tangos, that needed to be put down because that was his orders. But it didn't stop. They weren't being given any more orders, but they still had to fight for their lives. It wasn't until they got somewhere that each of them could call home that they found out exactly what was going on. Chaos reigned. The nation had ripped itself into pieces with part of the government trying to claim complete control, while everyone else was in open revolt or trying to grab power for themselves. Worse still, they weren't being paid anymore. They had been abandoned. The unit dissolved itself after that. Each of them took a portion of their supplies and headed back towards their homes. They wouldn't keep killing people if there was no point, no purpose to it. Abe ran out of supplies before he made it halfway back. For anyone else, that would have been the end of the story. But for Abe, it wasn't yet. In the interim, various corporations had moved in, providing food, shelter, and security for citizens in their sphere of influence. The goodwill was reciprocated, and peace, mostly, started to come back. Abe found himself nearly press-ganged into working with one of the cleanup details, trying to pick up the pieces in the aftermath and rebuild. It felt good, but he missed his home. Eventually, he talked to the boss about finding some way for him to move on. The answer was for Abe to join another fight. The next year saw him working alongside other former military folks, former police, and the like fighting to hold on to the territory in the vaunted name of McKesson. Abe had never heard of them before then, but fight he did, inch by bloody inch. Drugs were plentiful and hardly frowned upon, but Abe didn't feel he needed them. He hardly felt it when he had to put a bullet in someone or even slice them open. It made no difference. He wanted to go home. Some sort of truce was reached. The International Council on Rules and Universal Standards was created, and his wish was granted. He was free to leave, and the company would even provide him transportation home. The homecoming was bittersweet. Sweet because his wife had believed he had died and was overjoyed to see him. Bitter because they were still in the same spot as when he left, except that she was the one trying to get work this time. Still, the two celebrated their reunion in their own way. Things settled down for a time. The two had a kid, a little girl. That was the best thing he'd ever found in his life. But he discovered one day the fighting wasn't only in his past. It was a stupid thing. The kid wandered into the kitchen and started banging pots. Nothing that any other little kid hasn't done from time to time. But this was different. Something snapped in Abe's head. The house was dark when his wife came home, which should have alerted her that something was wrong. Abe flew out of the darkness and drove her to the ground. The feel of steel on her neck was foreign, but she knew what the sharp sting of being cut was. She didn't recognize the wild look in Abe's eyes, a look that his old unit would have recognized immediately. Security came and eventually managed to talk Abe out of the house. He was, of course, miserable and apologetic about the whole event, but he was politely informed that he would be leaving the territory and not returning. A few weeks later, his body had been found in the red zone. All of which explains my trepidation in taking Sonny up on his offer.